Last time we had you on, I believe, it was to talk about all of the people making the case for staying today in Afghanistan said the exact same thing a decade ago. So in your view, who are going to be the most vociferous opponents to this? And if Biden does face any obstacles, what are they going to look like here in Washington?
So the most angry people have been, I mean, it's changed because it seems like the anti-interventionist, the restraint crowd has made some headway. So when you read the New York Times, there's a little more skeptical of the leaks that the generals give them. But something like the Washington Post op-ed page is very angry. So the Washington Post within a day or two ran 4 op-eds by my count saying what a terrible mistake this was. So within Washington, I think it's coming from Republicans, but Biden is lucky because Republicans don't control either house of Congress. But people sort of got the impression that Republicans were against the Afghan war. That was only really Trump and a few pro-Trump media figures. And most of the Republican Party has been pretty angry about this, but they don't, like I said, they don't control either house of Congress. The Democratic leadership has been generally supportive. That includes Schumer, that includes Pelosi, that includes the more famous liberal members of Congress, including Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. They said enough is enough. So the fact that I think the Republicans losing the Senate, not taking the House, and then the fact that the anti-interventionist crowd has made a lot of inroads in Washington and in the press, I don't think there's going to be a lot of opposition. I think the opposition was before the decision was made. And I think with Trump, the decision and every foreign policy decision was sort of always up to negotiations because people always had this idea that he might change his mind at a later date. But Biden has surrounded himself with serious professional people. So I think, they've accepted defeat here, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of opposition in Washington.
So back in 2008, basically what we had was homeowners were being encouraged to overstate their income. They were essentially being taken for a ride by these banks. They would get a mortgage for a house that really was wildly outside of what their income would justify. Those mortgages were then bundled up in these complicated financial instruments that were stamped as like grade A, fantastic investments by the financial industry, and an entire house of cards was built up from, the ground level interactions with the homeowners. Now you have a very similar dynamic taking place, except it's overstating the business income on which these commercial mortgages are based, and then they're again being picked up into these complex financial instruments and spread throughout the financial industry. First of all, do I have that correct? And second of all, I'm really curious what for you was sort of the red flag that you started to dig into what was really going on here.
Sure, you're right, but the difference is that the borrowers are not overstating the income. It's the lenders that are overstating the income. Borrowers are not privy to the loan sale, so they do not often even see what income the lenders are representing for their properties. So, totally unbeknownst to the borrower. And it's a trap almost for the borrowers because of course, when you inflate the income, there's a higher probability of default because, the cash flow will go down. Well, it never occurred and never was there. So the default probability is higher. And when they default, the borrowers often say, well, I didn't inflate the income. And so, they're at a loss for explanation. And so then they're foreclosed upon. As far as what brought me to the realization they were doing this, back in 2008, I worked for the rating agencies, and I saw a lot of bad loans go across my desk, and they were magically refinanced during the 2015, 2013, 14, 15 era to 2018, and I thought, well, how the hell did they get those refinanced? And I, started looking, and it was very difficult to dig up these records, but, I got my hands on them. And yes, like Ryan said, universally, the cash flows were inflated.
Basically, since we have all of this sort of societal decay, right? People who are struggling in every way imaginable, and that's reflected in statistics like life expectancy literally declining for some demographic groups, suicides spiking. This past year, we are likely to have seen the most overdose deaths in our nation's history. And the police are brought in to keep that all under control so that it doesn't affect the, worthy people in the suburbs or in the McMansions, et cetera. What I love about having you on is that this isn't theoretical to you. You're an elected local official. You actually have to get into the weeds and into the mud and figure all this out and implement it in a practical way that's going to make sense in all of the varied communities in your county. What do those discussions look like? What are some of the specific things that your jurisdiction is planning to implement or that you're fighting for?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're right about the premise. Our police, it's a tough job. And they're asked to clean up for society's lack of investment in mental health, lack of investment in education, in economic opportunity, the fallout of income inequality. So that is a problem. But it's a tough job, but that means it makes it even more important. We need to fix all those other things, but we also need the right people in the job. And so some really practical things is reducing disproportionate contact. We're studying right now, can we move police out of traffic enforcement? We know in my county, if you're an African American, you're 3 times more likely to be pulled over than a white resident. In some parts of our counties, in the wealthiest parts, the parts where you said where they're protected, in Bethesda, for example, in my county, you're 7 times more likely to be pulled over as an African American than a white resident, despite the fact that there's very few African Americans just from proportionally that live in Bethesda. And so you have half of our students arrested in our schools are Black, but they represent 20% of the school population.
Wow.
Go down the list. And so one of the things we need to do is get police out of the things that they shouldn't be involved in. Low-level drug offenses, dealing with people with mental health in our schools. We just won a big victory of police will not be in our schools next year. I've been pushing that for over a year. And we're going to have a task force on what are the support students need, like restorative justice, mental health counselors, psychologists, and the like. So we need to get them out of things that they shouldn't be doing, because that will reduce negative outcomes. But then we need to invest in what they should be doing, right? No one's saying I'm not in the camp of that there shouldn't be police. We need to work on violent crime enclosure rates, things like murder, homicide, armed robbery. Let's have people focusing on those things, and then let's train people better and bring them in.